What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to Nightmare Success In and Out Podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares to set yourself free. Today, we are actually changing things up a bit because I don't have somebody here that was an ex-inmate and did not go to prison. But what I do have is I have a criminal defense attorney here who is the talk of the town and really the talk of the nation right now. Joel Schwartz. Joel, welcome.
Brent, it's good to see you, and I appreciate you having me here.
Well, I really appreciate you coming, and actually Joel's with me, and we're not on YouTube because we're not filming this on Zoom, so this is good. I'll probably sound better too, but so if anybody's been anywhere around the TV set in the last 6 weeks, Joel's book, it's called Bone Deep. It's actually written with Charles Bosworth Jr., and it's about a case about Pam Hupp. And the thing about Pam has been an NBC series here since March, which is really an incredible series. But Joel actually represented Russ Faria in the case, which we're going to talk about because it's an unbelievable. It reads and you see it like fiction, but it's a true story. But a little bit about Joel. Joel's kind of a very interesting guy. He is a criminal defense attorney, but he went to University of Texas. Actually, you went there for undergraduate and law school, right?
I started out at UCLA, sort of pursuing
you did
that dream
start.
of vaccine. Yes,
wow, that's not in here anywhere. I've done all this prep work, Joel.
Well, I was
UCLA.
I loved California. I thought that's where I wanted to be, and I actually went with my roommate who was swimming in the NC2A championships to Austin.
Yeah.
And fell in love with Austin, and I thought immediately this is a place
that
I could go to school, and that was back in 1981, and boy, was it a wonderful place.
I moved there in 89, and I felt the same way. It's like tripled in size since then. I want to read from the back of his book here just a little bit about Joel, because I think they put it in pretty well here. Joel Schwartz earned his law degree from the University of Texas of Law, has spent 33 years as a criminal defense lawyer in the St. Louis region as a principal in Rosenblum, Schwartz, and Fry. He's been selected to the annual Super Lawyers list. He's a member of the top 100 trial lawyers for the American Trial Lawyers Association and is a lifetime member of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. He's appeared on Dateline NBC, 60 Minutes, CBS Morning News, CNN, Fox News, and all over the place. He has been all over the place. And you've done, you were in St. Louis, but as I was reading, Joel, you've been all over. You've done cases everywhere from where I can see, from Colorado, California, all over the place. But interestingly enough, your story is interesting because you went down to University of Texas. You started, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was it the Men of Texas calendar?
That you have done your research.
Uh-huh.
I was chosen to be in the UCLA, Men of UCLA calendar back in 1980. And they then found out, and I had decided I was going to transfer, so I was excised from that calendar. And I got to UT and realized, I think at that time there had only been 3 in the country. There was Michigan State, UCLA, and USC. And I thought, what a great opportunity, not only to make some money, but to meet women.
Sure.
So what I did is
Texas,
I assembled women from all walks of life throughout the University of Texas and had them put together a panel and pick the guys they wanted.
I love it.
And fortunately, the thing sold. It was about I think the 4th in the country. We were on the cover of Newsweek, and it sold all throughout the state of Texas. And it enabled me to pay for quite a bit of my schooling, which was wonderful.
That is wonderful, because we had a Men of Mizzou calendar, but that came after the fact. I think they all started doing it after they found that this was all happening and people were making money with it. And but so you kind of were in that world of making money and creating kind of an entrepreneurial life for yourself. And then I thought it was interesting that you went and looked at law as a kind of a baseline for you.
It was a fallback. I was in Austin. I graduated from the business school, and I had no idea what to do. And I had interviewed for some jobs. I had some decent offers. For example, Citgo Petroleum gave me an offer in their management program. Well, they wanted you to learn from the ground up, literally. They were going to start me working in a 7-Eleven. I think I had to be there for 90 days. And I looked at that, and I looked at ultimately the end result, and it just wasn't me. And I still didn't know what to do. I did have this dream in the back of my mind of acting, but I also have this responsible side that's like, that's not something I can do. So I decided the best course of action was, okay, I'm going to get a law degree, and moreover, I'm going to find a way now to spend 3 more years living in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how it worked out. And then I graduated law school. I came back here home, which is home, to St. Louis. I took the bar, and I left the next day to go out to Los Angeles.
That's great. So you took the bar and just left.
I left. And everybody who takes the bar is very, very nervous about the bar results. The bar comes out on a specific day, and there was no online to check in back in the 80s.
It's the 80s.
So I had forgotten that the bar results had come out, and I started hearing this person passed, this person failed, and it was about a week late. I called in and said, hey, this is my name. And they said, Schwartz, I don't, oh, there it is. It's like, okay, great, I passed. I hung up, and that was that.
That was it.
I didn't get sworn in. I had no intentions at that time of practicing law.
That's just crazy. So you go out to L.A., your big dream is to become a movie star. And if I think your family's kind of has some background in that with the community theater and that. So you start waiting tables as a person who has a law degree, but it wants to be a movie star. And then something happens, a strike.
There was a writer's strike, and this would have been in 1989, and it went on and on. And I had made a little bit of progress. I was getting further at auditions, and I was meeting people, and things were going pretty well. As the writer's strike persisted, it just became drudgery. I would get unruly patrons, people who I would serve, and I started thinking, you know what, I'm no longer a struggling actor. I'm a non-working lawyer waiting on tables.
Yeah.
I didn't change my mind at that point in time, but what did happen is I ended up coming home because all I was doing was waiting tables. And I came to St. Louis, I think, to visit, to just stay here for a couple of weeks. And during the course of those weeks, I ran into Brad Kessler, who was in the middle of a murder trial. And I ran into him at dinner one night, and he said, you know what, I think you might like this. Just come join me. So I went and I spent a couple of days watching him try the case.
He's a great attorney, by the way, and a cool guy.
Oh, he's a wonderful attorney. I don't know that he actually practices anymore, but consequently, he did end up being one of the attorneys representing Pam Hupp.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it all came full circle. At any rate, he talked to the public defenders. They called me and asked if I would come down, and it was sort of on a lark. I went down there, walked into a room with, I think it was over 20 people waiting to interview me, offered me a job on the spot. And it was like, you know what, I need to think about this for a little. They wanted me to start the next day.
So they're ready to go.
They were ready to roll. I said, I need to think about this. Give me a few days. I don't even live here. I live in Los Angeles.
But you were the calendar of Texas guy, so
I was the calendar.
That could follow you.
Yeah, and that's what they wanted to see during the interview. It was a little crazy. It's still a big joke with the people who interviewed me. So they offered me the job, and I then decided, okay, I don't know how long this strike will go on. Maybe it's time to give up this dream and move on with life. And I called them back, and I said yes, and I committed to myself that I was going to try it for a year.
1 year.
And here I am.
33 years later.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So let's fast forward a little bit, Joel, because I know, you've had a lot of different types of cases and interesting cases. I read the one where you had, because this isn't the first case where you've had somebody who was innocent, the baby case where the baby's head was, the skull was bigger and it would move the brain, and that the family, somebody actually contacted you that wasn't a part of the case. The Brockmeyers, I think, was their name, and gave you information that actually freed the family from everything that they were under. Is that correct?
I have absolutely no idea where you're getting information, but it is 100% correct. Yeah, wow. I didn't even know there was publicity surrounding that case. Maybe there was some. Yeah, I ended up getting some information, not anonymously, but somebody had nothing to do with it, contacted me. It ended up getting a couple of doctors involved. I had that research. I met with them. They wrote some reports. I took it to the prosecuting attorney's office. And this was against Bob McCullough's office, and Bob and his staff did the right thing, and the charges were fully dismissed.
Which doesn't happen a lot. But, I mean, the fact that you had, and then you had the expert, and then the amount of times that happens was so few that they really had to look at it. But I can't imagine what that family would have thought, because they probably went through hell, with their kid and having to take lie detector tests and everything else that went along with it. But going into this is big time. I mean, you, and I think, Joel, you were contacted. Was it somebody that you had worked with before and years before that contacted you about Russ?
When I left the public defender's office, I spent a very brief time, 3 months, 6 months at a firm in Clayton, and they had a team of secretarial staff. And I had met all of them, and I got along with all of them well. And then I left, and there was no contact whatsoever. And then I guess it was early 2012, I got a phone call. It was Mary, Russ's cousin.
Yeah.
Who said, "Look, do you remember me?" And I think I said yes. I didn't think
Didn't
I
know.
actually remembered
Right.
her. And she told me what was going on with Russ Faria, and I had seen some of the publicity. And to me, what I had seen and what had been reported was guy killed his wife.
Sounded
brutally
bad.
Stabbed her, and I think I had heard rumors that there was blood all over him. And I also think I heard a rumor that he had confessed.
Yeah.
So I was coming in for damage control. At least that's what I thought at the start.
Yeah. I think the other crazy thing because looking at this case, it's so interesting. First of all, I mean, the fact that this person was stabbed 55 times. I mean, 3 times is a lot. I mean, to stab somebody 55 times. But the thing that I find is really interesting, first of all, is Pam Hupp, who's played by Renee Zellweger in the series. Renee does an incredible job. I just find it so fascinating that they talked to Russ for 32 or 36 hours or somewhere around there, and they had time to go back and check all this out while he was talking. And they talked to the 4 friends. They saw the guy on camera. He was wearing the same clothes. He stops by Arby's. I think he stopped like 3 or 4 places, and he couldn't have been there. But they never, ever looked at anybody else. I mean, I know that they always look at the husband. I mean, but don't you think that's unreal, Joel? I mean, you were in the thick of it.
Had Russ called me when he was arrested,
Yeah.
I would have said what any competent attorney says:
Stop talking.
stop talking, tell him you want a lawyer, and we'll sort this thing out later.
Mm-hmm.
What he did was he never actually realized he was a suspect. And as they showed in the series, he was eventually Mirandized.
Yeah.
They didn't do it at the start.
No.
He was a suspect from the first moment that they showed up on the scene. They brought him in, and by talking to him, what he was able to do is give them every single place he went. And had he not done that, who knows what may or may not have happened to the videotapes where he was pulling and getting
Yeah.
gas. He stepped outside his car for about 3 minutes and got gas.
Yeah.
Well, they knew the time he was there. They were able to get that video showing that not only was he there, like he said, but he was wearing the identical clothing that he was wearing when he was arrested later that evening. So he gave them all the information. They went out and they conducted what I would call a pretty thorough investigation, and then they redoubled their efforts. They actually went and had different people talk to the alibi witnesses. They separated them. They took them to police stations, interviewed them on tape separately at separate police stations, confirmed everything that he was able to tell them, as well as his cell site information. Then, for whatever reason, that to this day I still can't explain, they took different square pegs and attempted to fit them in a round hole, and one didn't fit, so they tried another square peg and another square peg. As we started the trial some 2 years later, I still didn't know if they were going to attempt to say the alibi witnesses were lying and it happened during the course of the time he claimed to have been there, or they were going to say he got home and he did it at that point in time, both of which were impossible.
Right. Well, they also, in part of that trial, even went so far to say that maybe those 4 people were involved, his friends were involved in helping him cover up this scene that happened at his house, which is just beyond belief.
Well, there was never any evidence for that. There was nothing to indicate that in any way, shape, or form, and I mean nothing. And then the prosecutor, Leah Askey, got up in closing argument and accused those 4 people of being complicit in this murder, stating one went so far as to drive by the Arby's to pick up a receipt,
right,
and then came home and brought it to Russ. Well, the things that the jury considered, I still to this day can't figure out, because that receipt that they're talking about, it wasn't in his pocket and it wasn't in his house, and he didn't direct him to it. It was crumpled up in his car along with 2 empty wrappers.
Right.
It's really difficult to grasp the concepts that this jury discussed when they initially convicted Russ.
I can't imagine, Joel, what it would have felt like. You know, I went through 6 years of all this stuff, but I can't imagine as an attorney. That's why I like having you on here today, because you're coming. You don't sit where I sit, but you've been in situations where you're sitting by the person going through the nightmare. Did it seem like at the time that the whole world had gone upside down when you were in that courtroom? I mean, did it feel like that every single person had lost their mind that was part of the other side?
They had lost their mind, or they had no mind to begin with. It got to the point where I was insolent. I was insulting. I was doing everything I could to try to get the judge's attention.
Yeah.
I went so far as to say, actually, at one point in time, I have no idea what to do to gain your attention, to make you listen to me. Maybe if I just stripped down naked and were banging my head against your bench,
You'll pay attention to me.
I would get your attention, because the rulings were like something out of...
Is it all pretty accurate to what we're seeing on the NBC series?
It is accurate, but what's being seen just scratches the surface. The depth of the incorrect rulings, the depth of the corruption with these police officers. The one thing that was...
What was going through your head when you went into the office that day with the judge and Askey, and it was just casually dismissed that, no, we're not allowing anything in as far as Pam and this insurance policy? Or what was going through your mind?
Great question. She filed this motion. I looked at the motion. I thought, this is garbage. It's not worth the piece of paper it's written on. And as we're walking in, Leah Askey turned to me and said, you know, if the judge rules in your favor on this, I may have to reconsider these charges, which tells me she at least has an inkling.
Sure.
Maybe Pam Hupp had something to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so because the judge is absolutely going to rule in my favor, because there's no
reason not to.
There's no reason not to, and all the law is in my favor. So we go in, we have an informal hearing. And I get notice in the mail about a week later that she ruled against me. And then then I realized, all right, this is what we're dealing with. So then I filed a motion to reconsider, and we had a big, long hearing on the record. I stacked 100 cases on the bench in front of the judge to the point where she couldn't see me anymore.
That wasn't in the series.
No. I mean, this was a long, drawn-out hearing, and she ruled against me, and I just couldn't believe it. And I talked to a couple other people who I consider to be very, very well-versed legally, and they all said, look, I doubt you're going to lose this case, but if you lose it, you get to do it a second time, because it's so bad. It's so bad.
Yeah.
And then what's even worse is to rub salt in the wound. As we start the trial, the prosecutor got up and she said, this is about greed. Russ Faria killed his wife to get his insurance proceeds, and I went ballistic. And I approached the bench, and I asked for a mistrial. I wasn't granted that. I asked for the jury to be instructed to disregard, and the judge then said, Mr. Schwartz, I ruled that you cannot get into the insurance proceeds. I did not rule that the state couldn't. And I looked at her, and the first thing I said was, that's fine, the door is now open, because they have gotten into it. And the judge maintained a ruling that I couldn't get into, and I thought, okay, the world has turned upside down.
It's gone upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, I mean, you can just see it. I'm assuming it's got to be weird to watch you being played by Josh Duhamel, which I would love to be played by Josh Duhamel. So, I mean, weird in a good way, but is it strange to see you in your life, which is a big case, played by someone who's basically being you, mouthing your words?
It is. It's somewhat surreal. I've gotten used to it now.
Yeah.
It's weird when they keep Leah Askey, or that Judy Greer, who's playing Leah Askey wonderfully, goes, Joel, talks about Schwartz did this and Schwartz did that. Thankfully, I think Josh is doing an incredible job, and I don't know that I could ask for somebody better to be playing me. And it also was weird. there is much of it that uses the identical words that I used.
Yeah, that's got to be really strange.
It is strange. Now, there are parts of it, for example, I don't think there's a hotel called the Green Gables in Troy. If there is, I didn't stay there. I didn't take my guitar in to see my client.
Yeah, now there's a connection to that because Joel has a band, and I didn't know the connection to that when I saw until I started doing a little bit of research here. You still have a band that's Joel's effing band, and you guys still go out and play, and you sing and play the guitar, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, see, I wish they would have had Josh do a little bit of strumming on the deal so it all connected to that.
Well, I talked to Josh about that.
Yeah.
There were two things, and I've also talked to Jenny Klein, who wrote the show.
Yeah.
They call her the showrunner. They penned this for 6 weeks, and as they got it written and produced, they wished they had at least 2 more weeks.
I feel the same way.
It neglected to show my or Josh's emotional arc and the frustration and everything that I was going to, which was crazy. And then things that were fun and a little bit funny, and gave people information as they intended to film a thing with my band.
Yeah.
Not me personally, but Josh having a band.
Right. Josh being the guy.
Yeah. And all that type of things, all those types of things were left out.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you what it was like being a part of, because you're the real person and working with them. And I'm assuming you did that by Zoom because of the weird pandemic or whatever. But what was that all like, you being the guy? They want to know about the real stuff that happened and working with these actors and stuff. Did you feel like you were right there, networked in and part of the deal?
Without question. They wanted to know what kind of car I drove, what my daily routine was, what I had for breakfast.
Yeah, what you like to drink.
What I like to drink. And they actually called the night that they were filming the scene. And it's crazy. There's a scene where Nate and Josh are working together and they're drinking bourbon.
Yeah.
Well, they had called that night. I was actually sitting with my wife, Marianne, drinking a bourbon, and they said, "What are you drinking?" I said, "Bourbon."
Bourbon.
They went and got bourbon, and that's what they used in the scene. So they attempted to be as true
and it's
to
a
life
cool
as they
scene.
could.
You're in your library or wherever in the house, and you guys are pouring bourbon and talking shop.
Yeah, it was fun. They took pictures of my house, and a lot of people who have been to my house many times asked if that was actually the house. So they did a decent job of replicating that.
Replicating everything. Mm-hmm. So going back to the trial, it comes back in a terrible verdict. Russ gets life plus 30 years. He immediately is taken to state prison. What's going through your mind now? You know that this is all a farce. What were your immediate thoughts, Joel, of what you were going to do?
Everything I possibly could.
Yeah.
I didn't just get an appeal ready. I actually got an appointment and spoke with the governor's chief of staff and asked him to step in to waive the appeal and send this back, because it was blatant on its face that this trial was a farce. And there was another case pending regarding the direct connection rule. And if it doesn't go into detail too much in the book, and certainly not much in the show, but the reason they did not allow me to get into Pam Hupp's inconsistencies and lies, which were numerous, and the insurance proceeds, and I could show by cell site that she was at the scene of the murder
at the
time of the murder, and she lied about it. I couldn't get into any of that.
Just like incredible. I think the other point that you bring up about that insurance policy is, what was it, 11 years that he was on the insurance policy?
Yeah.
And she was on it for 4 days?
Yeah, what I said in closing argument is he was on it for 4,000 days.
Yeah.
And miraculously, she was alive. Pam Hupp was on it for 4
days.
Yeah.
And she died.
And she died, and Pam was the last one with her. And Pam was there based upon the testimony of the 2 first responders. Pam would have been there at the time. And when they questioned Pam where she was, and we pinpointed her by cell site, she said she was home.
Yeah.
Jury didn't get to hear any of that.
Mm-mm.
And that's what I presented to the governor's chief of staff, and they agreed with me, but they weren't going to get involved at that point in time. And fortunately, we came up with this Mooney motion. And in my research, most people who are convicted of crimes like this, before they get overturned or appeals, it's generally about 12 years.
That's a long time.
It's an extremely long time. for an innocent man, for anybody to be locked up, guilty or innocent. For an innocent man, it's unbelievable. We not only got this overturned incredibly fast, we were in a new trial in less than 2 years. That's how fast we got this thing back. So the original question was, what was I going to do? There was no stop that I wasn't going to pull out.
What was Russ thinking in this time period? Had he given up hope, or was he totally 100% in Joel's camp that, hey, he's going to get me out of here? What because there's a couple of different things that happen in your mind when you go to prison. One is it's all over. I'm getting in a fetal position. Other people try to keep themselves busy and try to keep being themselves. I mean, what was Joel's mind? What was going through him?
Russ's mind was incredibly upbeat. He continued to have faith in me, and I have been told time and time again, Joel, it's amazing how you stuck to it, how you persisted. And I appreciate people saying that to me, but what's as important, if not more important, is that Russ continued to remain faithful to me. This was an innocent man who had got convicted. I was his attorney. And frequently, people will turn on their attorneys, and they have to lay blame somewhere.
Sure.
And I was an easy target. He never lost faith. He was never down, and he continues to say today, it was like going into a boxing match, literally with hands tied behind your back.
Yeah.
So he kind of understood it, even notwithstanding the individuals who in the penitentiary who were telling him, hey, you should get this woman, Kathleen Zellner, who was out of Chicago, and she's wonderful. Yeah. She got Ryan Ferguson out, and I think Ryan was released the week that Russ went in.
Okay.
So I'm sure that had to be.
I think that was Kathleen Zellner's first big case, wasn't it, with Ryan Ferguson? Because I know Making a Murderer came after that, but
yeah, I don't know if it was her first case.
I mean, it was one that was big to Missouri because of Ryan's, that whole case was beyond strange, of a dream sequence of a friend that said that they thought they did this, and Ryan ends up serving, getting convicted for murder for life in prison.
And that he had, I think, 11 years in, and thank goodness for his father that produced this documentary. Kept going. Wouldn't give up.
Yeah. So you go to Russ, and I think this is interesting because I think it's gutsy, Joel, because there's two ways to go with this thing. You had been burnt by a jury in a bad way. Like, how in the world did they all get it wrong? And how could they not have seen it? So I know what you're thinking, but you decide that you get this second shot, second bite of the apple, and you're going to the judge as the juror to decide this case.
The second guessing that had been going on behind my back was unending. And people said some stuff to me, but moreover, they were talking behind my back, and it's like, what the hell Schwartz think he's doing? And a couple of friends of mine who are attorneys would say, don't you think Joel has a pretty damn good idea what he's doing? And the fact is, in these small towns, everybody knows everybody. And while the jurors at least said they didn't know Leah personally, people knew her family. They knew of her family, and individuals had stated afterwards that when they were interviewed, well, I've known Leah's family forever, and if Leah really thinks this guy did it, well, he must have done it. Well, the judge we got was Steve Omer, and Steve Omer was a prosecutor in the city in the 80s for about a decade. He knows what a real case is. He had been a judge for about 20 years, I think, at the time, maybe a little bit longer, and I've been in front of him a bunch, and his integrity is without question, and he knows what the law is. I knew what the facts were, and there was not a fact that was going to be debated. It was not whether or not he had to decide if a witness was lying or if a witness was mistaken. There was no fact, no provable fact whatsoever leading to Russ Faria.
Right.
So I didn't want the innuendo and the theories, everything that Josh had talked about in his opening statement, because those were my actual words, to cloud this case. And those were going to go nowhere with a judge like Omer. So I decided to take that risk. Hindsight's 20/20, and I'm thrilled that I did.
It worked out. And, I think I remember you talking about one of your interviews. You've talked to your wife about it. You talked to the other defense attorneys about it, and you really just finally had to come to your own terms with, no, I'm just going with what is in the gut here, and I'm good. But I can see how you came to that. I do think that there is some scary propositions in a small town of, you've got to convince those people, and if you'd already been through it, you'd already experienced a very weird case, and they all got it wrong.
It's not that they got it wrong.
They didn't get to hear it.
They didn't get to hear it.
Right.
But what they also didn't hear was any fact specifically tying Russ Faria to this case.
Right.
The closing argument that Leah Askey made, and I've never heard anything more unethical since I've been practicing law, is she just made up a story. I started out objecting, and then I sat back and I said, let her go on.
Just let her go.
She's, in effect, digging her own hole, and these jurors aren't going to buy any of this because not one thing she said was indicated provable during the facts of the trial.
Right.
So it was something where that taught me a lesson. And the second trial, her only argument to Judge Omer was, well, who else would have done it? And that was as far as it went because there wasn't a fact that she could hammer home.
Well, let's go to the pictures because I think that's just fascinating how this happened because you didn't have, I don't think, you didn't know that those didn't come from the prosecutor, Askey. They were labeled from her office, stamped, coming to you as it should have. So it didn't seem weird. But then she gets up and actually starts her opening statement with the exact same story. And then you realize immediately she doesn't know I have these pictures.
So,
which is like a movie. It is now they're making it.
It's not like a movie. It's not like a movie anymore. And the pictures that you're referring to, Major Case Squad disbanded without actually charging Russ. 7 days later, he was charged, but what occurred in the middle of that is they did a search of the residence. It had been contaminated. It was no longer partitioned off, but they went in and they did a search, and in doing a search, they laid down what's called luminol, which will make blood glow. And then they said, and I didn't know anything about that search when we started this trial, and I didn't have a report on it, but that was their probable cause to actually take it over the top and charge Russ. So they claimed that they took pictures of this luminol and it showed a trail that only the person in the home would know where these things were. There was a trail from the body to the blood, to the towel drawer, to take the dog outside, to the back bedroom where the shoes were found. And they took photographs. Unfortunately, the camera malfunctioned, so no pictures developed. It showed absolutely nothing on anything they took. And I was furious about this.
Right.
I was furious and objecting it during the first trial and that circus. And after the trial ended, I still continued to say, I want the camera. Mm-hmm. I want, I still don't understand.
Whatever you have.
Was there film that didn't develop?
Yeah.
How does it not
What happened?
How does it not develop?
Yeah.
I had nothing on it. And I continued to, every single time we got together, I would say to the judge, I want this. I filed continued motions. And then one day, trial was set for November. Mid-August, I got a CD in the mail from the Lincoln County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. Opened it up, and there was 132 photographs, which confirmed that this officer perjured himself. Everything he said was a lie. So I couldn't wait to cross-examine him. The surprise to me was when we started the trial, Leah Askey said the same thing. Unfortunately, the camera malfunctioned and none of the pictures developed. And I leaned over to Nate Swanson, my co-counsel, and I said, she
doesn't know.
No idea I have these. And we debated how it happened. There is no Tina that I'm aware of in the office as portrayed in the movie.
Okay. I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, there is no Tina. There is no, but maybe there's a conscience in that
Has
office.
to be.
Well, there's another theory.
Okay.
The other theory was Leah was just lazy.
Really?
The cop said, hey, there's nothing on this.
Just send it.
She just sent it.
Okay.
There was a signed letter. When I say signed, it was hand stamped with her signature, not actually signed. I still think someone in the office said.
Well, because there's another piece in the NBC part that has her destroying the order to destroy the evidence from the trial that she puts through the shredder. So
here's what happened there.
Okay.
There was a destruction order.
Yes.
And a sheriff decided on his own that this stuff should not be destroyed. Okay. And it was taken.
This is fun, Joel, to see what it actually is. Well, I didn't know that girl didn't exist. So
she did not exist.
Okay.
That wasn't destroyed. What happened was a sheriff took the stuff to St. Charles, and that's where it was stored. Now, with that said, there was some stuff missing. So I spent quite a bit of time with Mike Wood and his investigators, making sure that they have everything that they should have in order to prosecute Pam Hupp now. And I hope I didn't just ruin it all for your listeners, but Pam Hupp is being prosecuted for this murder.
Yeah, that's happening as we speak, really. That's and to go on with Pam Hupp. I mean, there's other things with Pam Hupp. You know, her mom falls off the ledge when she's saying that maybe she's going to take her off the insurance policy. You know, she kills the guy that she wants to frame Russ for, and he's got like a little stupid note in his pocket. I mean, the things that she did, like, and I think you said this, if you don't put, Pam Hupp could go kill somebody else if she's not put away. I mean, she's that type of person. If you've got an insurance policy, watch out.
After Russ was acquitted, I called Rich Callahan, who was the U.S. attorney, and there's only two people that have jurisdiction. That would have been Lincoln County, and Leah Askey certainly wasn't going to do anything. That scene where Josh went in and said, hey, if you want to reopen this, I've got everything.
I've got a lot of stuff. Yeah.
That sort of happened.
Okay.
But it didn't happen with her.
Right.
It happened with the U.S. attorney.
Okay.
I called Rich Callahan. I went down and met with some, and they opened an investigation. And I have been told that Leah did, in fact, inform Pam, as portrayed in the series, that there's a new investigation. And I think desperation set in at that point. And unfortunately, at that point in time, and it's never really been referred to this way, but Pam Hupp went hunting.
Yeah.
Louis Gumpenberg was the fourth individual she tried to get in the car.
That's really something. It's scary.
Yeah, she went hunting for a human being to kill.
And she killed him.
She killed him.
Shot him as he came into her house.
It's one way to put it. Yeah, she had set the whole thing up.
Yeah.
And if you've ever listened to that 911 call, I may have not made it as an actor, and you may have not made it as a director, but she had no shot.
No shot.
Yeah.
No, it's just the whole thing. I think, you know, Joel, looking at this whole thing as you've lived it, and you've been speaking to these basically sold out crowds that want to hear this story from you and how you lived it. What do you think the fascination is?
It's that car wreck that you can't take your eyes off of. It's also, look, this can't happen to me. Yeah. But what if it does?
What if it happened?
I mean, Russ Faria was a guy, he was working IT.
Next door neighbor.
He was working IT for Enterprise. They went out on the weekends. They went to church. He went out to see his buddies once a week. And then this happened.
Yeah.
He wasn't a guy on the streets. He wasn't, he'd never been in trouble in his life. And then the fascination becomes, this was Murphy's Law of the legal system. Every stopgap that is in place, from the investigators to the prosecutor to the courtroom, meaning the judge as well as the jurors, failed. And I don't know whether you want to include me in that or not, but ultimately, at least initially, we failed in defending him because he was convicted. The fascination, I think, is the story itself, as you stated in your intro. It reads like fiction. It speaks like fiction. My uncle read the manuscript when we finished it, and he said, Joel, this is unbelievable. If this was fiction, I would have put it down after 100 pages because it can't be true.
Right.
Well, it's all true. What's amazing is after the book was published, I took it to my two partners, Scott Rosenblum and John Rogers, and I gave them a copy, and they both said the same thing to me. Do I really need to read this? I already know the whole story. I gave them the book. They read it. And they can't stop asking me questions about it because nobody, even including my wife, she goes, why? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you don't.
There's a lot more in the book than there is in the TV series. And there's a lot in the TV series. And I think it's a great TV series, but you get a lot more detail of how things shake out and when moment to moment they happen, which is, I always think reading a book is different than seeing something on TV or movies anyway, but
clearly. Well, the TV series is also the thing about Pam. It's really Pam's point of view.
Yeah, it's about Pam.
That campiness, the satirical take, it's sort of Pam's mind.
Yeah.
I mean, her mind is different.
Very different. And I think that's kind of the way they played this whole series out. You got the Keith Morrison. It's almost a parody on Dateline. But the way that her personality is, I think that's the reason why they built it this way, because she bounces around and does these weird things and sucks on her straw, and it's a whole personality.
They told me one of the reasons they were doing it this way was to grab attention. There's so much out there, and there's so many options streaming to watch. As I watched the first episode, and I knew Keith was going to narrate it, it struck me that this is the Grinch who stole Christmas.
Yeah.
That first intro with Keith Morrison, it's like, okay, this is their take, and she is the Grinch.
Yeah. She's the Grinch.
And it was more difficult to watch at the start, but as you kind of get used to the narrative, you do. And now people the ratings have, from episode 1 to 2, the ratings went up 400%.
That's crazy.
Continued to rise. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I want to ask you a question too, because I very rarely I haven't had a criminal defense attorney on the podcast, and we've had a lot of different guys that have gone through and given their stories. I'm curious, Joel, of all the different people that you've represented, because 97% of the people who get indicted end up pleading conviction. Have you ever had someone that you've represented that went ahead and pled, but you really felt like that they should have gone to trial? Because you guys practice for this.
One of the things that the judge asks you in state court, generally federal court, but not in so many words, is are you pleading guilty because you are in fact guilty? And many times the judge will say to the attorney, do you have any reason why your client should not be entering a plea of guilty? I don't know if it's 10%. I don't know if it's 5%. But the answer to your question is yes. There's quite a few people who have decided, I just can't take that risk. And I firmly believe, knowing more than anyone else about the case, that this person should go to trial. Mm-hmm. And the figure that you talked about I think those are federal figures.
They are.
State court is much lower conviction rate, especially in St. Louis City these days. Yeah. I have had many, many, many cases dismissed, and I think it's due to that you gain a reputation. It's not, and I'm not saying a reputation that they're scared of me in trial. What I'm saying is a reputation for honesty, sincerity. I work my ass off, and I think that it's so important to put the facts together. And if I'm coming to you and you're a prosecutor and I say, Brent, this guy didn't do it. Well, if I'm just saying it and I don't have anything to base it on, okay, it's in one ear, not the other. But I put it to you, and I know I'm going to try the case, and I also know once you see what I'm presenting to you, you're going to lose the case. Yeah. And so the case gets dismissed. Or it gets bargained down to something that's palatable that the client actually is guilty for. Yeah. So it's a long-winded answer to the question. The answer is yes. It's not that often, but it happens. And even if it's, say, 5%, well, I don't know the number of millions of people that are indicted every year, but 5% is a lot of people.
A lot of innocent people that go and do their time. Yeah.
Without question.
Well, and I'm not going to name names, but there is a big case that's been kind of drifting around with a known prosecutor that held back information. It's such a strange world that we live in when both sides are supposed to provide, and I mean, your job is to defend, their job is to justice and to give you their whatever they have so that you can defend. Do you find that you run into times when you feel like you might not have gotten a fair shake from the other side?
The problem we have is our system, which I think undoubtedly is the best in the world, is run by humans. Mm-hmm. And by human nature, you want to win. So you're going to have individuals who, as you correctly stated, my job is defense. I push the envelope within the bounds of ethics and legality as far as I can to defend my clients. As a prosecutor, your job is not to win. Your job is justice. If justice calls for this person being exonerated, that's why you're required to turn over these things. There shouldn't be a need for a defense attorney. Right. If you had a person who was completely unbiased as a prosecutor, they should be able to present both sides to a judge or jury or whatever the trier of fact may be and let them decide based upon unbiased points of view. Let witnesses testify and let a jury decide. Unfortunately, you get prosecutors who are overzealous, and it's a very fine line. I'm at the point in my career where I believe if a prosecutor intentionally hides evidence and it can be proven, and someone goes to prison, if a witness is threatened, coerced, whatever the case may be, if there's false testimony, pictures consciously withheld, something along those lines, and somebody does prison time, I don't see a reason why the prosecutor shouldn't face the same consequences. Yeah, and that's a good point, Joel, because I think as it sits, it mostly happens that there's a slap on the wrist, and they go on, and you can read about all kinds of different books where this has happened. But I agree, if there's something that's been done where someone wasn't given the rights that they were supposed to have, and they go to prison, and it's proven that things were done wrong, there should be some more
consequences or bigger consequences than really what happens in the course of things. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think the winning part of it is the tough part of it with our justice system, because winning also provides promotions and other things that happen with that. And I don't know there's a way to shake that out. I just think that's just, like you said, it's humans. And it's that we do have the best system that there is, but it's not perfect.
We had a civil suit in this case against the cops and Leah Askey in Lincoln County. It worked in our favor, but the prosecutor, Leah Askey, was removed from the suit. She likes to say it was because she did nothing wrong, and that's not the case at all. She was removed from the suit because she had prosecutorial immunity. Prosecutorial immunity needs to be revisited.
It does.
And then that may fix the system. And I'm not saying not to give them some form of immunity, but there are bounds, and those bounds right now just simply go too far.
I totally agree, Joel. So what else? What else have I not asked you that I wanted to ask you?
We can't encapsulate that in one interview. There's too many more things.
I love everything that's going on with you right now. I mean, and I think the other thing I really love about Joel, you're a family man. You do your band playing, you do a little acting, and you get these great cases, and you give it your all. And from my side of things, man, I wish there was you could be duplicated and cloned 100 times over, because you're the kind of guy that you need standing in your corner when you're living your nightmare and you're hoping that somebody's going to be there to fight your battle, because that's what you do. You take on somebody and you help them fight their battle, and you hope that person gives everything. You hope that person buys into you and wants to be on your team and be with you as you step through your own nightmare. And you carry, it's a big deal, and I appreciate what you do.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I'm fortunate enough to have gotten to a point where the attorneys that I practice with in my office couldn't be better. My partner, Scott Rosenblum, and Matt Fry.
He's great.
The guys couldn't be any better. So we have the luxury and the fortune of getting
I think you guys have one of the best criminal defense firms in the nation. I mean, as far as where the cases that you've had, the winning streak that you all have, and the respect that you guys have is incredible, and it continues on. I mean, I think you guys continue to get good cases, and you continue to do great work, and it's great that you guys are in St. Louis.
Well, it's kind of you to say, and I appreciate it. I know my partners do too. It's just something where there's not a client I have where I don't attempt to put myself in their shoes. And most people will say, okay, you know what, he can spend the night in jail. What's the big deal? To me, if I had to spend the night in jail, having never been on your side, that is a nightmare to me. I don't know. I don't to this day know what it's like. I got caught in the jail once. I spent about 4 or 5 hours before they got me out, but I knew I was getting out.
Yeah.
I can do my best to empathize.
Yeah.
But I simply can't put myself in those shoes. So I defend everyone like that one night matters, that week matters, that year matters.
And it does.
I know it does. But it's also, you know what? Look, the difference is, and you have to understand, and you know this actually better than I do having been through it. I try and explain to clients, somebody doesn't want to plead guilty, and they need to because they're going to do 3 years. And that sounds like forever, especially if you're 25 years old. But if you go to trial and you're going to do 15 years or 20 years and you're going to take that risk, sometimes it's really, really the wrong decision. You have to have an attorney who you trust, whereas it seems it's going in, and I would imagine most people are like this, that I'm never going to make it 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to harm myself. I'm going to do something that I shouldn't do to avoid facing this. And I have clients who I used to represent, and they are so good to my current clients that they are always willing to come talk to them and talk them through that fear that they go through, which is why I think your book is incredible, because I've recommended, I have to admit I haven't read it yet, but I know the concept of it, and I've recommended it to a couple of clients that are going through this right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I do think that there's one of the things I can say, and I think this is important for people to know. With your mind, nothing is as bad as your mind makes it out to be, not even prison. So you can get through it. You just have to step through it. And it's as long as you keep stepping through it, you'll make it through it. And I think that's a great idea and purpose that you have in having people talk to other people to walk them through that, because somebody who's been through it can walk somebody through that and I really do believe that nothing is as bad as your mind makes it out to be, not even prison. Even when you're standing at the gates of Leavenworth, if you have some strategies, you can walk through it. Not that you're not going to have bad days, but you will survive. And surviving and adapting is what it's about.
Yeah, I can't talk somebody through it the way you can or anybody else. I've never lived it. I can't imagine. I mean, when you went in, you knew it was finite.
Yeah.
Russ Faria went in.
He knew it was for life.
With life without parole. He was never going to see the light of day. And he's talked to many, many of my clients, and the faith that he's given them with what he faced, it's incredible. And he's one among many of my old clients.
Yeah.
My clients have become, a lot of them have become my friends.
Yeah.
And they will do whatever it takes to help one of my current clients knowing what they went through.
I think that's great. I think it's a great way to end it, because that is so great to hear that really you've bonded back and forth, and then those people are using their experience to help others. And I think that is very, very, very cool. For those who need to get out and either get on Amazon or go to Barnes & Noble here locally, check this book out, Bone Deep. This is a hot book, because, this is a hot topic. Joel's out everywhere speaking, and the places are filling up. I said, you're just going to Vegas here when?
2 weeks.
2 weeks from now, big crowd.
1,500 seats sold out.
Oh, man.
It's been crazy.
That's just so much fun. And you've earned it, man. I think it's so cool. For those listening, love the likes and the subscriptions. And if you like it, leave a review. Bone Deep, Joel Schwartz. If you want to read another book, I wrote one too, Nightmare Success. Check them out. Thank you for being here today. Nightmare Success, in and out.